Welcome to the debate. Imagine you are tasked with building a suspension bridge.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Right. In engineering, you have the absolute comfort of physics. You calculate the tensile strengths of the steel cables, you factor in the load capacity, and, well, gravity just does its predictable thing. The structure stands, the variables are entirely known.
Yeah, but what happens when you leave the safety of engineering and, transition into the realm of national governance or geopolitics and crisis management?
Well, exactly.
Suddenly, the materials you are building with have a mind of their own. They change their properties depending on the political climate, or a sudden spike in inflation, or just unpredictable public sentiment. The variables are fiercely, stubbornly human.
That is exactly it. The math of human society is inherently unstable. And today, we are examining a fascinating curriculum proposal and a set of deployment-ready deliverables for a newly designed institution. It's the Institute of Social Policy and Strategic Studies, or the ISPSS.
Right.
The core mission of this institute is to serve as a multidisciplinary hub. It is trying to merge evidence-based social policy with hard-nosed strategic governance and security studies. Its stated ambition is to produce leaders who don't just design policy in an academic vacuum, but who can actually execute strategy in the real world.
And it is an incredibly bold ambition. If you look at the source material, the proposal explicitly targets a pervasive issue across governance systems, particularly in Nigeria and the broader African context.
It identifies this core problem as weak policy implementation systems. So you have brilliant policies on paper, but they basically fall apart when they hit the real world. To solve this, the ISPS is proposing a highly structured, digitally driven approach to strategic education.
Which brings us to our central question today. We are exploring the profound tension between the curriculum's ambition to teach incredibly complex, nuanced strategic leadership and, well, its heavy reliance on a standardized, asynchronous digital delivery model to achieve that scale.
Yeah, that's the core of it.
When I look at this curriculum, I see a revolutionary approach. I'll be arguing that the ISPS's asynchronous powerhouse model, which utilizes a master SCORM architecture with variable logic and branching scenarios, is a highly effective way to standardize baseline strategic competence across a massive range of learners, from certificate seekers all the way to PhDs.
And I'll be taking the opposing view. While I completely acknowledge that a digital-first approach is undeniably scalable, I argue that the rigid nature of automated e-learning modules, multiple-choice diagnostics, and pre-programmed simulations is inherently flawed for this subject matter. When you try to translate the profound art of strategic governance into algorithmic exercises, you risk stripping away the very complexity leaders need to navigate.
I think we have to start by looking at the sheer magnitude of the problem the ISPSS is trying to solve. When you are dealing with systemic failures in public administration, you simply cannot rely entirely on boutique, qualitative seminars that only reach a handful of elites in a single classroom.
Scale is important, sure.
It's vital. I see why you think the digital model might be rigid, but let me give you a different perspective. This proposal brilliantly solves the problem of weak execution by merging the science of strategy with scalable technology. The curriculum doesn't just ask learners to read about strategy. It uses structured, performance-based learning objectives.
You're talking about the ABCD format.
Exactly. The ABCD format, which stands for audience, behavior, condition, and degree. It demands observable, measurable outcomes. The Institute guarantees a measurable standard of excellence by demanding a 70 to 80% pass threshold on these rigorous digital modules.
Right.
This means that whether a learner is just starting out or entering a high-level fellowship, they possess a verified, mathematically proven baseline of operational competence before they ever step into a room to make a decision.
See, I come at it from a very different way. Strategy, especially when we are talking about thematic areas outlined in this curriculum, like geopolitics, poverty, inequality, and national security, strategy is fundamentally ambiguous.
But there are core principles.
Sure, but strategy at its heart is about navigating human irrationality and the fog of war. The source material includes profound classical strategists like Karl von Clausewitz and Sun Tzu, alongside incredibly complex modern frameworks like game theory.
And the curriculum explicitly maps those out. Cluster 4 covers exactly those classical and modern strategists.
Yes, let's look at Cluster 4. Think about Clausewitz's concept of friction in war. Friction is his idea that, in reality, things always go wrong. It rains, your radios break, your supply lines fail, your troops are exhausted.
Right.
Or think about Thomas Schelling's modern concepts of deterrence. Those involve the deep psychology of convincing an adversary that you are willing to do something mutually destructive just to keep them in check. These are nuanced, highly contradictory theories of human behavior.
But you still need a baseline understanding of them.
Yes, but assessing a learner's grasp of these profound theories via an ABCD instructional framework, where you must have a condition and an observable degree of success, is a mismatch. You cannot measure a leader's capacity for strategic foresight by seeing if they can correctly match the definition of deterrence to a drop-down menu on a digital slide.
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame it differently. I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because it ignores the structural reality of the ISPSS academic framework. Let me use an analogy here.
Okay.
It's of those ABCD learning objectives, the observable, measurable outcomes, like a musical scale. Before a policy leader can improvise a geopolitical masterpiece in a real-world crisis, they must first flawlessly execute the basic scales.
But strategy isn't a piano.
Hear me out, hear me out. Standardized modules ensure the foundational vocabulary of strategy is universal. How can you debate the nuances of Schelling's deterrence in a live seminar if half the room doesn't actually know what the term means?
Fair enough, vocabulary matters.
Right. And the master SCORM architecture requires a final assessment of 10 to 15 randomized graded questions. Once everyone has passed that 70 to 80% threshold, the foundational knowledge is verified. Then the deeper in-person executive roundtables and policy labs, which the curriculum also outlines, can begin at a much higher intellectual baseline.
I appreciate the musical scale analogy, but here's where it breaks down for me. In music, a C major scale is a C major scale. It is a universal truth. Strategic leadership doesn't have a universal C major scale.
It doesn't?
No! By forcing complex theories of conflict resolution or defense policy into an ABCD format, you are demanding a type of engineering precision that simply does not exist in the subject matter. Let's say a learner is studying the strategic failures of Robert McNamara during the Vietnam War, which is referenced in the material.
Okay.
What is the correct multiple-choice takeaway from a failure of that magnitude? The curriculum promises to turn out graduates who can shape national development trajectories. You don't learn how to shape a nation by memorizing the correct definition of game theory on slide 4 of a module. You learn it by grappling with the ambiguity.
I get that, but you do need to know the mathematical mechanics of game theory before you can apply it to public financial management or economic policy strategy. The digital delivery ensures that knowledge is secured. And more importantly, and I think this directly addresses your concern about ambiguity, the curriculum doesn't just leave learners in the realm of theory.
You mean the simulations?
Yes, it moves them into applied practice through simulated policy execution. This is arguably the most compelling part of the proposal.
You're referring to the scenario-based branching logic built into the e-learning modules?
Exactly. We need to explain how this actually works because it isn't just a basic quiz. The ISPSS is utilizing SCORM 1.2 and 2004 compatible architecture. SCORM isn't just a video player, it stands for Shareable Content Object Reference Model.
Right.
It's a sophisticated technical standard that allows the software to track complex behavioral data and create interactive variable scenarios. For instance, the sample module outlines a scenario where the learner acts as a commissioner for health.
Right, dealing with resource allocation.
Yes. The learner is faced with the governance decision. Do they invest a limited budget in new hospitals? Do they invest in community prevention? Or do they utilize a hybrid model? Upon making their choice, the system uses branching logic to provide an immediate consequence simulation.
An automated consequence.
Yes, if you pick the hybrid model, the algorithm calculates the second-order effects and presents you with the new reality. This is essentially a flight simulator for policymakers. It safely builds decision science and operational research skills. It allows learners to test different variables and see the consequences of their resource allocation before they ever touch a real national budget.
That sounds incredibly innovative on paper. But let's go back to our opening metaphors. A flight simulator works because gravity is a constant. The laws of aerodynamics do not change based on cultural context or sudden economic inflation. Sure, but the variable logic in these score modules is entirely pre-programmed by an instructional designer. I am highly skeptical of this mechanism for strategy.
Why? I mean, if it calculates the variables based on data, isn't that exactly what we want leaders doing?
Because real society is not a pre-programmed algorithm. Let's look at the actual thematic areas the ISPSS intends to tackle. WASH, which is water, sanitation, and hygiene, human development, local governance, and decentralization.
Yeah, complex areas.
In the real world of social policy, there is rarely, if ever, a clean, hybrid model option sitting on a desk that, when selected, triggers a predictable, logical consequence.
Are you saying simulations hold no value in strategic education? Because militaries and think tanks have used wargaming for decades.
I'm saying that training leaders to expect immediate logical feedback from policy decisions creates a dangerous false confidence. In real governance, you might invest in that hybrid healthcare model, and the consequence isn't a neat statistical improvement shown on the next slide.
What is it then?
The consequence might be a sudden labor strike by nurses because of how the funds were distributed, or a supply chain failure due to a regional geopolitical event. By reducing complex policy decisions into pre-programmed algorithms with correct pathways, the curriculum risks producing administrators who think society is a complicated machine that can be tuned.
Instead of an ecosystem.
Exactly. Rather than a complex ecosystem that must be navigated. You can make the mathematically correct choice in a simulation and still lose in reality because human beings are involved.
I see the philosophical concern there, but let me push back on your skepticism of the digital simulation environment. We have established, based on the source material's own justification, that Nigeria and the wider region suffer from deeply entrenched, weak policy implementation systems.
Yes.
We are talking about environments where strategy often fails precisely at the execution phase because leaders don't anticipate second-order effects. If you acknowledge that reality, isn't practicing the allocation of resources in a simulated environment infinitely better than practicing on actual citizens during a national crisis?
It is only better if the simulation accurately reflects the friction of reality. If the simulation teaches you that policy is a clean equation of input and output, it might actually degrade your strategic instincts when you face a truly irrational crisis.
But the curriculum explicitly includes systems thinking and data-driven strategy in its core learning units. It is actively teaching learners to understand the very complexity you are talking about. Slide 8 of the sample module directly covers the integration of artificial intelligence in policy decisions, data analytics, and digital governance.
So it's teaching tech with tech.
It's preparing them to use technology to manage that chaos. We must recognize that the branching scenarios are tools for developing mental models, not crystal balls. The software tracks how long a learner spends analyzing the poverty statistics versus the financial data before making a choice. That trains the executive brain to pause, analyze evidence, and weigh opportunity costs.
Let's talk about that executive brain, actually, because this brings me to a major point of contention regarding audience appropriateness. We really need to look at who the ISPSS is actually training.
The leaders.
Right. The proposal outlines an incredibly ambitious target audience, particularly for their one-off and executive programs. We are talking about permanent secretaries, sitting legislators, senior military and security officers, and high-level development partners.
Yes, the exact people who desperately require rigorous evidence-based frameworks to reform institutional governance.
Right. Now imagine a 55-year-old senior military general, someone who has commanded actual troops in volatile regions, taking this asynchronous course. They reach slide 12 of the sample SCORM module, and the completion screen flashes. Congratulations, you are now a strategic thinker, level 1.
You're pointing to the gamification aspect of the instructional design.
I'm pointing to what feels like a fundamental psychological mismatch between the gravity of the subject matter, the ego and experience of the elite learner, and the medium of delivery.
Gamifying national security and poverty alleviation with Level 1 completion badges treats profound institutional leadership like a smartphone game.
That's a bit harsh, don't you think?
I don't think so. Elite strategic advisory frameworks require intense peer-to-peer debate. They require the collision of different worldviews, the challenging of assumptions in real time between experienced professionals. You do not forge a strategic mindset in a permanent secretary through isolated screen time, clicking through micro-learning slides to reveal definitions.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered the reality of scaling an institution of this magnitude? The curriculum deliberately uses a blended model, and I think we need to be clear about that. You're focusing heavily on the asynchronous SCORM modules as if they exist in a vacuum.
They are a massive part of it.
They are, but the source material outlines a much broader delivery system. The digital platform is just the asynchronous backbone. It is designed to allow the institute to scale beyond a physical campus, reaching diaspora learners and international participants who just can't commute to a classroom in person every week. Scale is important, yes, but not if it sacrifices depth.
It doesn't sacrifice depth. It actually enables it. The digital backbone handles the heavy lifting of knowledge transfer, the foundational theories of conflict, the technical mechanics of public financial management, the definitions of foreign policy analysis.
So it frees up classroom time? Exactly. Because that baseline is handled asynchronously, the in-person components can be fully optimized. The curriculum specifically includes physical policy labs, real-world field placements, executive residencies, and capstone dissertation defenses. That is where the intense peer-to-peer friction you're asking for actually happens.
And the badges?
As for the gamification, psychological studies consistently show that progress indicators, even simple ones like Level 1, significantly increase engagement and completion rates. Regardless of the learner's real-world rank or prestige, human brains like to see progress.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that a sitting legislator needs a digital badge to stay engaged with the geopolitics of their own region. Furthermore, this isn't just about a few asynchronous modules. This is tied to formal academic accreditation.
Right, the NUC alignment.
Exactly. If you look at the NUC-aligned course credit structure, the National Universities Commission, which validates the postgraduate diploma or the MSc, a significant portion of the coursework is delivered through this learning management system. The continuous assessment, which makes up 30 to 40% of the student's final grade, relies heavily on these automated knowledge checks,
which ensures objectivity in grading.
But when an academic system prioritizes algorithmic, measurable testing for 40% of a grade, the curriculum inevitably shrinks to fit what the algorithm can measure.
That's a strong claim.
I think it's true. The truly profound elements of the strategic studies core, things like leadership, strategic communication, or the nuanced history of defense policy, risk being stripped of their necessary ambiguity just so they can be processed and graded by a SCORM 1.2 manifest.
Well,
if the ISPSS wants to establish itself as a premier national and regional policy think tank hub, as the proposal states, it must guard against producing technocrats who believe an 80% pass score on a digital module translates seamlessly into institutional reform. The science of strategy is vital, but the art of strategy is what actually sustains transformative solutions in complex, messy governance environments.
And yet, without the science, the art is just blind guesswork. We are coming to the end of our time, so let's sort of synthesize where we stand on the ISSPS curriculum proposal. From my perspective, the integration of strategic studies with social policy, delivered through a rigorously structured, NUC-aligned, asynchronous digital powerhouse, is a truly visionary blueprint. It directly attacks the crisis of weak policy implementation by mass-producing capable, baseline-verified policy executors. It brings the precision of decision science, system tracking, and observable standards to a field that desperately needs measurable competence.
And my position remains that while the multidisciplinary scope of integrating social policy with strategic governance is brilliant and frankly much needed, true strategic leadership will always resist being neatly packaged.
Right.
The kind of leadership required to manage geopolitics, national security deterrence, and deep institutional reform requires navigating profound ambiguity. It requires an understanding of human friction that simply cannot be fully captured by SCORM-compliant variables, branching algorithms, and automated multiple-choice pass thresholds.
I think where we absolutely find a point of convergence is on the sheer ambition of the project itself. The necessity of bridging the gap between theoretical social policy design and hard-nosed strategic execution is an urgent, critical challenge. This curriculum boldly attempts to solve it by leveraging every tool available, from classical theory to modern e-learning architecture.
Agreed. It is an incredibly ambitious framework. The intricate balance between scalable educational technology and the deeply human, often chaotic art of strategy is an ongoing puzzle. It's one that will likely define the success or failure of institutions like the ISPSS in the years to come.
It brings us right back to that suspension bridge we started with. The math and the engineering, the SCORM modules, the data analytics, and the ABCD learning objectives, they can give us the structural foundation.
But the ultimate test of the bridge.
Exactly. The ultimate test will always be how it handles the unpredictable, shifting weight of human society walking across it. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of strategy, technology, and scale. We leave the final judgment to you, the listener. Until next time.